Hello and welcome back to Fantasy Fiction Friday. I am so glad you're here. I hope you had a wonderful week. If you're new here, my name is Genevieve Gravel. My friends call me Gigi. And I read short original stories that I've written. Right now we are working on The Ladies of the Lily. It's an anthology of short stories. They're dystopian fairy tales. Right now we are on Cleons' tale, Rain the Third. The knocking at my door felt as if someone was knocking on my head. My head had a dull ache for days, probably from crying so much. I was all cried out, and all that remained was this monster pounding on my brain. It was almost assuredly a well-wisher offering gifts of food or flowers and a story to tell, or some cliche saying like, he's not suffering anymore. I'm so sorry for your loss. The words I had become no stranger to. I had no desire to hear them ever again. Then the pounding at the door came louder the second time. I had considered not answering it, but whoever was there was persistent. I dragged myself from the overstuffed sofa to the door. I was the king's personal messenger. I was glad I had answered. The handsome young man handed me a scroll tied with a thin red ribbon and left me be. I had seen the king at the funeral. He had said he would send a summons for me. I thought he would wait a bit longer. It had only been 6 days since my father had died. I knew we would talk of who would take my father's place at the court as the court's financial officer, a prestigious position at the table of the king's advisors. Rain the Third would need for me to take an apprentice to take my father's place. A position he should have never have had. My father had been born to a mistress of the robe, the boss of the seamstresses. He had been a mathematician and the most apt in all the realm of the Great Oak. His position had brought him a great deal of notoriety, and it was not often that a fae was moved from the lower branches to not the top, but the fourth branch was as close as any fae could hope for. I missed him, just as I knew I would. I had faced grief before, but this time it was different, though. My mother left this existence when I was as young as 4. I couldn't remember her face, or her voice, or the feeling of her presence, and I missed her anyhow. After she died, my father never left my side, and I would sit cross-legged on the floor next to his oak desk as he worked. He even took me to meet the king periodically throughout the years. He had been my teacher, my mentor. Though his grief over the loss of his beloved, my mother, he turned to me and showered me with his love and attention. Perhaps he realized how precious life was, or perhaps I just reminded him of his truest love. Either way, I'd become the apple of his eye. As such, he refused to leave me in the care of the other women who were at his service for child care. I'd gone everywhere with my father. For the 15 years that followed, I was by his side, and I felt as if I had lost a limb. I mean, who was I if I was no longer his child? I had excelled in my education under his tutelage with emphasis in mathematics, and I graduated early with honors as a result. At the young age of 15, I had begun to clerk for my father in service to the crown, and he taught me everything he knew, and with that, everything I knew. And not a week after his passing, I would be called to pass on his legacy to some stranger. I felt a tinge of anger and resentment. Meow. The knowledge was a gift he had given me, and I was going to be required to give it away. Tears rose in my eyes again, and the pounding in my head forced them to close and put my head on his desk. I should go to bed, I thought. My mind swarmed and whirled with thoughts of my father's and concerns of what the king would ask of me in the morning. They filled me with anxiety, and I hoped whoever would be assigned to my father's position would have the ability to understand the equations my father had used. Most could not. It was not basic math that had been taught to the masses. It was far beyond, saved only for the best and brightest of scholars. And that was my dad, the best and the brightest. Oh, how I missed him. Sleep would not find me that night. Maybe that was a good thing. When I had slept, I would wake with a flutter of loneliness in my chest. It was unrelenting, not painful, just all-consuming. Kneeling before Rain the Third in the throne room, my headache had not dissipated, and the dark circles under my red eyes stained my swollen face. It had taken all of me just to get dressed. Bathing and makeup was out of the realm of possibility. Rain the Third had not aged well. His body bloated, the skin of his face hung off of him, and he had once been a strikingly beautiful young man. A portrait behind him showed. The king who sat before me wore the passage of time. The king addressed me, and I rose to my feet, holding my head high as what was expected of me. Do you have the capability to do what your father did, follow all his directions? He asked. Yes, of course, I spoke softly. I expect for the operations to not change. Can you offer this service to the crown? He continued. Yes, I know his schedule well, I said. I paused, waiting to find out who I would be teaching, hoping it was someone I had known. I was socially awkward and cared not to meet new fae. Actually, more than that. I cared a lot. The thought of it rose in my throat, choking me, threatening for tears to flow once again. My heartbeat pounded visibly through my purple shirts, and the gown left me shaking slightly. You are now appointed the financial officer to the king, as declared by King Ring III, he said. I had known all too well that this conversation would be short and direct. Rain III had not been one much for small talk or kindness, but I hadn't expected to hear what he said. It took me a moment to process what had just happened. Did he say I was appointed? No, that could not be. No woman had ever taken a position as a king's advisor and a seat at the table of advisors to the king, not even queens. And though 5 kings had passed in the time of the Great Oak, some things remained the same. For a woman to hold honors in education or be granted such an assignment to the crown, that was unheard of. But before I could question or even process what had just transpired, he dismissed me. So I gathered my skirts and swiftly walked out on shaky legs. Another sleepless night would find me. Cleon, go to sleep, I scolded myself out loud. I tossed in my bed, fluffing my pillow for the 100th time, heat radiating from within me. I drew my blankets off my body. Uncomfortability hit me, and I pulled them back and found myself getting angry. Forcing sleep was impossible. I had so much to do in the morning, with the census due to the King's Council. By the end of the week, this had proven to be pointless. I threw my legs over the side of the bed, better to fill my time with something productive. I poured myself a cup of tea and sat at my father's desk. I rolled a pencil with my index finger over the top for a moment while I caught my thoughts before I got to work. Calculating every birth and every death of the year, my father's death would be counted in the next census. What we had produced compared to what we needed. One calculation, another stack of receipts. Numbers surrounded me, offering me comfort. I closed my eyes halfway as the dawn drew near. At long last, I fell asleep right there in his chair with my head resting on the desktop under my face, a pile of papers. My nerves were the only thing to distract from my grief. I took a deep breath and entered the conference room. The 4 men sat at a large round table made of oak. The polished wood matched the walls and the chairs in the room. The messenger who had served me stood in the corner behind the king. I took my seat in the only chair remaining. I felt like a fly caught in a spider's web. Outside I was calm, but inside I was chaos. The maid poured me a cup of hot tea, and its floral scent served as a welcome respite from the stench reeking from one, if not all, the men. A plate of dainty pastry sat in the middle of the table. I reached for a round raspberry cookie covered in sugar. Careful to not wreck that beautiful figure, the master of arms said, staring at my breast. His mouth was covered in powdered sugar that had sprinkled into his beard. In fact, all of the men there, the king included, looked more like roly-polies than fae. And he was worried about my figure. You wouldn't want to ruin your chances of finding a suitable husband, the master of arms carried on, not removing his gaze from my shirt that was buttoned up to my neck, exposing nothing, and I shivered inside, looking away and ignoring the comment. I listened to the meeting intently, waiting for my turn to speak. Nothing had anything to do with me or my position. I may have had a seat at the table, but I knew my place as a woman. To the matter of the economy, that was my cue. The king looked at me, and I picked up my folder of papers and handed them to the messenger, who was at my beck and call. He walked them across the room to the king, who looked them over. He took a moment to scan the hundreds of pages and paid attention to nothing more than the bottom line. Production's up, he said with pride. Death rates are high among the lower branches, but their birth rates are on the rise. Good. We've secured a future workforce. About that, our production's too high, actually. We have foods rotting in storage, and that's what's given to pay the workers. If we lower food production, we can offer fresh foods and improve the health of the workforce. I shuddered at calling Faye workforce, as if their lives and existences were nothing more than a resource. Keep to the numbers, sweetheart, the king's personal assistant interrupted me. We will attend to the matters of state. My words had been a literal matter of life and death, and I was dismissed. They actually thought that it was a good thing to feed the majority of the colony rotting food. But I had said it was so trivial. I believe if I had not said anything, not one of the men in charge would have taken notice of the causes for the death rate being on the rise. Either way, they would not have cared, not so long as babies were being born to the lower class. The workforce who started as young as 5, producing the very resources that would kill them, such as rotting food that was poison. And none of that mattered so long as we, the chosen few, had the most. I felt disgust burn in the back of my throat, my mouth filled with the taste of bile. Last matter is a matter of legacy. My son, Prince Christopher, is expecting a child. The messenger placed a scroll in front of each of us, seated at the round table, invitations to a ball, in honor of the expectant mother. Let's hope this one's a boy, one man said. 5 girls is far more than enough, another retorted. He may need to find a new wife, if not, someone else chimed in, and men's voices filled with laughter as one talked over another. The weight of cigar smoke and misogyny sat on my chest as I waited for the last of the men to leave before walking out. Relief cleared the rancid taste in my mouth, and I released a shaky breath once I found myself alone in the hall. It would be another month before I had to face that again. I had no intention of attending the ball. Why would I? I had no escort, and that was required. I had attended the last one and the one before that with my father. He had not been a dancer, so we sat and ate, and he talked with many people, all men, while I stood there with a quiet smile. It was not fun, at least not for me. I found that large crowds filled me with anxiety, and just the thought of trying to find a stranger to take me was beyond anything that I could fathom. I had no intention to hyper-focus on it for the next 2 weeks, so I decided to not attend and put it out of my mind. I wouldn't know anyone there, less the 4 men from the round table that had no desire to see again. You failed to attend the ball, the king said, as I received a summons the morning after. I found myself alone with him, his body stiff and rigid, seated in the throne on the stage above me. I was in trouble. A member of my council, you are expected to be in attendance to every event hosted by the court and crown. I apologize, your majesty, I said with a curtsy. I had no one to escort me. I hadn't tried, but it had been the truth nonetheless. You should have asked a friend for a brother or a cousin. I hesitated. The truth was I had spent my life at my father's side or buried in books. I didn't know anybody. I found that embarrassing to admit. I have no friends. I hung my head in shame, finding it hard to speak at an audible level. That is unacceptable, the king responded. I will expedite an invitation to the ladies of the Lily. You will make friends there, and he dismissed me. No invitations to the ladies of the Lily had to be approved by the king. The rules had changed to keep anyone deemed untrustworthy out, since Lily, the founder, had suffered a horrific attack. It had become far more exclusive of a club only the upper crust of society could attend. I couldn't comprehend what I would have in common with the frivolous nature of such women. I had spent my life in the presence of grown men, and from them at least I knew what to expect. I knew how to behave and what to and not to say. I had to make friends, and I had no idea how. I was going to fail. I wanted my dad. Actually, who I wanted for was my mom. I was entering the hornet's nest. I sucked in the air, wishing I could find the courage, as if oxygen was going to ease my anxiety. Give me strength, I willed myself. I opened the door to Lily Hall, and no one took notice of my presence. At least one. Ladies, meet Cleons. She's joining us by the way of direct invitation to the king. Janice introduced me. I had met her once before. She was the master-at-arms wife, tall and slender, her hair piled on top of her head, her breasts starting to burst out of the top of her blue gown, her face powdered and her lips painted red that turned down. I smiled as the others turned to look at me, then carried on with whatever conversation they had been engrossed in. The maid brought me a dainty cup filled with tea, and a porcelain tray of cookies sat on the low table in front of the settee, flanked by hardback chairs. The cookies sat untouched. I had wanted one, but I dare not take it, as no other woman had. Social cues, I told myself, follow the social cues. I had just known I was going to embarrass myself. In the center of the room sat a large statue of a beautiful fae, her face solemn, with crimson tears flowing from her eyes. I stood silently, taking in her somber beauty, when a small fae approached me. She spoke first as I sat there fiddling with my necklace. I didn't even turn to look at her. She surely would have seen the look of fear in my eyes. The story is that she was the fairest in all the land, winning her the affections of the king, who was her one true love. Then a terrible accident left her face badly burned and took her life. She now cries tears of blood and haunts the halls, searching for her long-lost love, she told me. What a fantastic tale, I thought to myself. The story I had heard of Lily was somewhat different, but that wouldn't explain the crimson tears. A haunted statue did not satisfy my curiosity either. I'm Cherie, wife to the prince. Her smile was bright and welcoming. Cleon, I introduced myself with a bend at the knee. It's just Russ, Janice intervened. The statue is carved of pure granite, I responded. Janice shook her head, looking down at me. Did she not know only metal rusts? I assumed the tears were resin from the cigarette smoke that filled the room. I opened the shutters to the window in search of some fresh air. I much preferred the sweet stench of cigars that the men smoked to the slender counterparts that the women folk smoked. The sunlight reflected off the mixture of fresh and stale smoke, and I took a deep breath, relieving my nausea. I don't care for this smoke either. Fanning her face and turning into the sunlight. She was shorter than I by a lot. Unlike the other women who wore outrageously large updos powdered in soft pastels, she wore her hair free-flowing, dark and straight. She had dark eyes and pale skin of a light blue, and her rounded belly showed that she was expecting. Susie's wife to the master of the guard. She was his wife, I thought, trying to wipe the vision of that elder, fat, sweaty fae rolling on top of the girl, not more than a third his age. And I realized that these were all the wives of the men that I sat on council with, and the immediate relations of the king. Everything I did and everything I said would each reach their ears, and quickly at that. My pleasure, I said. Don't say something stupid. I told myself, searching for a way to fill the awkward silence between us. That's a beautiful fan. Thank you. I'll send one over to you. I have a girl that makes them, Susie offered. I had an entire wall of books behind my desk, hundreds of them. I had read them all, some more than once, be that as it were. I never read what these ladies did. Books filled with heaving bosoms and throbbing members and... Your husbands let you read this, I ask. My skin flushed, feelings of uncomfortability and shock swam through me. I had never been with a man that way, despite me being past married age. I had not realized you're a spinstress, Janice retorted, snobbery showing through her body language, and she looked down her nose at me with her right hand to her chest. I hated that woman from the start. I squinted my eyes in slight disgust. How could she be so presumptuous and rude, announcing to the room my virginity? Husbands pay no mind to what their women's do, so long as we're there to do what they say when they say, Cherie said. So these women were supposed to be my friends. I had nothing in common with them. I could admit, though, I did enjoy the books they left me. Thinking of the messenger to the king, he had been the only man I'd ever found attractive. But obviously I couldn't act on it. I was a lady of the lily, and with that I could not just throw myself on a man. The help at that. And he had no notice of me anyhow. But in my dreams, he would be there, doing the things I had only read about in books recommended by the ladies of the lily. You're not like us, are you? Janice, with her perfect posture, sat behind me, crossing her legs at the ankles and sipping her tea between words. I was taken back, though I shouldn't have been. She had found a way to bring attention to disparage me at every meeting. She had taken on the unofficial role of leader, and others followed what she said and jumped at her demands. Janice wanted hibiscus tea, and others wanted coffee. It was hibiscus tea we all drank, without question, without fail. And she had chosen me, for whatever reason, to take a special interest in. Pray tell, how did you come by an invitation from the king to join our little club? She put an emphasis on his title, as if I was somehow not worthy of knowing him personally. Now, the ladies of the Lily did more than just read and gossip. They planned all of the crown's events as well. Each of us took part and attended all. I had no escort, of course, and Janice made sure to point it out and ridicule me, claiming I had special favors from the king to be permitted such leniency. But when it came to planning the events, I had a skill that was invaluable. I could do the budgeting, draw up contracts for goods and services, and make sure the event space was roomy enough for all who would be in attendance. And everyone else was qualified or had a desire to do so. And still she demanded answers from me that were frankly none of her business. I sit on the king's council, I retorted, emphasizing his title, mimicking her question. I had hoped that my position would in some way force her to back off and find something else to obsess over, a different life to ruin. And she laughed out loud and in my face. Nonsense, no woman sits on the council. She turned her head to make eye contact with each of the ladies that spoke. I'm the financial officer, I insisted. No, why would I lie? How could I lie? My position had never been officially announced. It wasn't customary to do so. But it had not occurred to me that no one had told their wives they served with a woman. And with me, and no one there stood up for me, I honestly don't think that they knew. You must sleep with the king. Her words stung as they rang through my ears, and her gaze slowly glided down my body. I gasped audibly, lifting my hand to the collar of my neck. Not only was the accusation deplorable and disgusting as well, I refused to satisfy her need for a debate or the excitement she was searching for in creating drama. It was a prosperous notion and deserved no attention. To do so it was beneath my moral character and had better things to focus on, as the census and the GDP report was due soon. I excused myself and left the meeting early, taking a cookie with me. Someone ought to be eating them. Well, besties, thank you so much for joining me today. Join me next time. I don't know if it's going to be 2 weeks or a month or next week, but I will come back with part 2 of Cleon's Tale from Ladies of the Lily. If you don't want to wait, it can be found on KU or in physical copy on the Zon. Otherwise, just hit subscribe. I'll read it to you. Woohoo, let's go. Love you. Remember, you're valid, you're worthy, you're loved. Goodbye.